Hello and welcome. Welcome to a session on from Experience League around speeding up your web experiences. My name is Mark Schultz. I'm a product marketing manager here at Adobe, based in the APAC region, specifically here in Sydney, Australia. We've got a great session lined up for you today from Experience League. If you haven't checked out Experience League yet, great place to check out great documentation tutorials and interact with other people who are doing exactly what you do. So if you haven't already, go and check that out. Now, this is a live session, and hopefully you're watching it live, but you have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with us. So the comments, if you just want to say hi, you want to ask a question, we've got some great content to go through today. So with that, let's get straight into the session. Let me introduce Cedric Kushler, who is the lead product manager for Adobe Experience Manager sites. Hey, Cedric.
Hey.
Now, Cedric, I'm sure I undersold what you do at Adobe. I know you do many things. So maybe you just want to introduce yourself and explain, all the things you're involved in.
Sure. Thank you. Well, thanks for having me first. I know I've been listening to your sessions with other folks, and so finally I'm on too. Yay! So
Welcome.
what am I doing? I am the lead product manager for AEM Sites, as Mark just said. I just recently took over extra responsibility. Actually, also leading the storefront team for on Adobe Commerce. So I really focus on topics that are about delivering web experiences, and I think also that's what I want to talk about today. Really about how do we deliver fast websites. So let's get into it.
Good. Hey, just before we get into the main topic, I couldn't help notice the fun fact. You can't tell left from right.
Well, so there's this thing. Apparently, there's people who cannot distinguish left from right. I'm one of those. It's a weird thing. It's really under pressure, like like you're in a car and then you kind of trying to find something, and some people next to you say, "Wow, it's on the left. Make the left turn," and I'm just at high confidence do a turn to right. Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird thing, but this can happen.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's interesting. It's I guess it's a fun fact.
I've known you for many years, so it's one of those little things. But you also grow orchids.
Yeah. So I think that was kind of like as a joke, as a comparison. There's rather complex things, I guess, that
Yeah.
are rather, I don't think easy, but they seemingly go easy. Yes, I do love to do that. I have a good collection of orchids at home, and I kind of like to, and that's actually a kind of a challenge, right? Once they're blooming for a good. They can bloom for a good few months, right? Really nicely, and then obviously at some point they fade. And how to
Yeah.
get them to grow back? It's a lot of people can't really do it, and I don't think I have good tricks here to share today. I guess I'm gonna share some other tricks, not about growing orchids, but there's
Yeah.
ways to do it, and it's really fun. It's rewarding because obviously
All
the
right.
flower's
Well,
beautiful.
you never know. You might get people hitting you up on Twitter or LinkedIn for orchid tips. We'll see. But
All right,
yeah,
excellent.
let's get into today's topic. We want to make web experiences fast, and let's get straight into that. What does it mean when your site is fast? Like, why should we bother?
Well, this is good. So let's talk about this a little bit, and I want to show you something after that. But let's talk about this. So first of all, most of us, when we visit websites, for us, websites are fast because we probably have decent computer because we're working with computers, so we're pretty
Yep.
decent computers. We'll probably live in an area where there's good network, or you're in the office or at home and a good network connection. So most of the websites are probably fast. But again, there's lots of folks that are not, and
Yep.
I think that's one aspect of it. And then we'll talk about this in more details shortly. The other aspect I think which is interesting is really like you go to a website to complete a task or web experience to complete a task, or you have something in mind, and typically in a rush. And so there's the performance of your site can make a difference to whatever that person will complete their task or not. So the
Yep.
success rate of what happens on your site is depending on the performance. So if a site is really slow, and if a site is really, really slow, you might have experienced that before yourself, where you kind of gave up and said, "Oh no, that's it. I'm out. I'm out of here. I'm going to go somewhere
Yeah.
else. I'm going to do something else." Right. So it might have not happened to you often, but that certainly might have happened. So I think these are the two parts that I think I certainly want to, kind of want to deep dive a little bit more in.
Yeah, I think there's a user experience. Everyone knows when the site's slow, right? And there's a measure of, is this acceptable experience? But then it's not just about acceptable, right? It's like there's a so what around, when am I done? What's good enough? And is it just a pride thing as far as, I'm really happy with my website performance, or what does it actually mean, like from a business perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, let me actually quickly share a little something. Just
Sure.
one point that I made earlier, see if we can switch that over to my sharing. Um, so, going back to the devices that folks use, again, websites are probably faster on your computer, so that's a common phenomenon. But if you look at the distribution of what kind of hardware, and this is actually mobile devices now, most traffic today on websites are actually mobile, and particularly when it comes to commerce. And so it's interesting that, yes, it's true that if you always have the latest iPhone, you probably won't have really that many performance. Like, websites might not be as slow as for most other folks. But if you actually are not buying a high end phone or not having a high end phone, the performance of the CPUs, that actually, and the network haven't really grown substantially. And you see this in this graph where over the years, on one hand, iPhone and the top of the line Samsung phones have grown nicely, versus the current more mid range, low end phones actually have kind of stagnated. They haven't moved, right? So in this case, it was like, oh, sure, yeah, no problem. We can add even more JavaScript. There's no issue with that. It's fast on my computer. It's going to be fast on mobile too, because everybody has the latest phone anyway. Um, yeah, that's not true, right? I think that's
Yeah.
a fact that we have to understand here. I think one thing. Now, to your question, right? What happens so there's a few things that I think are important. And let me actually get into. Let's talk a little bit about the business aspect of it, and then we can maybe talk a little bit about the technical part of that, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
so if you look at, and I talked about people not being able to complete their task that they were intended to come to do to the site. So there's some good research out there that are linked up here, that then I'll be able to show some of our own research shortly here. Also, is really that there's these key things, like how long does it take until the website appears visually, which what we refer to as LCP, or largest contentful paint, right? And then there's the other aspect of it, is how quickly does an, like, just again, something actually starts loading and then until it's completely loaded. But we'll get to this in a bit. But they do matter whatever how long you're staying on the site. So one of the key metrics is that people track in, either Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics, whatever analytics package you're using, is really this time spent on site. Like, how long are you actually staying on that site? And obviously, another one is the bounce rate. Like, are you just coming to site and just go away, right? So bounce rate is you're not actually doing a second click, you're just doing one click. So these are the bounce rate, time spent on site. So the first thing that you notice when you, let's say, get an existing site and you start tuning on the performance, you're trying to make that site faster. The first thing you're going to see in your analytics is that time spent on site will go up and bounce rate will go down. And
Right.
this graph kind of shows us a little bit. Now, that's one particular test that was done. That is obviously, actually specific numbers here. But I think if we've done a few of those by now, and it's been interesting that we were able to replicate similar improvements along the lines of if really done. So in this case, it's almost, it's kind of like, it's almost like it's a no-brainer. Why not everybody's doing that, but I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
one certainly aspect that makes, and it ultimately results in conversion rate, if that's something that actually happens on your site. If you're obviously in commerce, there's conversion rate. Some sites don't really have that conversion, but then time spent on site obviously also helps for the brand to, there's more exposure, more time people reading things, and kind of therefore learning more about the brand or the product or services that you're offering.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point around like the mobile aspect to it, because I mean a lot of us sit at home, we've got fiber connections and things are ultra fast, but I'm in the APAC region. A lot of people don't even use desktop; they just it's mobile first for everything. The latest stats as far as you look at mobile, traffic is around what 65 to 80% of web traffic out there. So it becomes increasingly important. Even when I'm traveling around the United States, even though the cell coverage can be really good, there's a lot of times when it's not so good, right? So I think your comment around bounce rates and time on site, it's not just for normal everyday traffic on desktop, but it's accelerated when it comes down to connectivity and the actual device itself. So yeah, good to know.
All right, excellent. So I don't know if I think one thing that I would love to kind of go into a little bit more, if you don't mind, is we at Adobe actually did an experiment. We said, what would happen if we create the fastest website possible? All right. Now, one thing is having a existing site and kind of improving it, right? But what does it actually means if you could create the fastest site? What would happen, right? So let me show you. Go back to sharing, and again, we're gonna spend a few minutes talking about that. So give me. Um, so the question is, what does it actually mean to build the fastest site, right? What does it actually mean? So here, what we're looking at is two screenshots that we've made. Now I'm going to show you the live site and I'm going to explain it a little bit more. Is the one was in the beginning was the existing site, right, where you see some of the little timings here. So largest contentful paint on mobile was like 20 seconds, which is reasonably long. As I don't know how many people are actually going to wait for 20 seconds. Now again, might it be okay or not okay? I don't know. It's depending. But if you get that down to like 1 to 3 seconds, there's no brainers, no problem at all, right? So what happens if we could make sites that are fast? Now, these measurements that you see here, and again, I mean, some of you obviously might be very familiar with that. Is what Google has established. One hand is what we call the Lighthouse score, which is a lab value, which means it takes your environment or whatever environment the test is done and see how fast is it on that particular environment. And it does add some simulation to it to kind of figuring out how would it be with lower network or a slower CPU. So it does simulate some like older devices there for mobile. And then there's data that is the Chrome User Experience Report, where you actually get real data. So I'm going to show you both a little bit of what that means if you can create the fastest site. Now, before we even get into this discussion of, okay, sure, you can make a site that fast. That's awesome, great. But who are the fastest websites, right? Like if you want to kind of get up a benchmark, and it's interesting. So of course, there's a few. There's not that many actually. If you really go find one. But so an interesting fun fact, I guess, the UK government websites, actually generally the UK government websites, they're some of the fastest websites that the UK government is doing. And so it's interesting. So the way to look into this or measure this is there's this site trio where you can access the Chrome User Experience Report for an individual site. But if I basically go look that up and you can obviously do that for your own site at any time. Go, of course. Let's see if I get some issues loading that. Oh wait, what did I do? Oh, here we go. So the trailing slash. Right? Anyway, so if I go look that up, it's so you see some of the technical. This is now not it's not like the analytics things like time spent on page and bounce rate, but this is more like the core web vitals where you see technical specifications for how fast that site is. So here you've it's kind of an interesting stat. So again, largest contentful paint is when the website actually appears visually, right? So that is in my mind the most important metrics. Now again, the others are also kind of good indicators of what's going on. but the largest contentful pane is good. So in this case, that's an absolute phenomenal number. So 97% of all visitors that go to the UK government website, and not just the homepage, but like all pages below, right, get the largest contentful pane in 0.7 seconds. That is absolutely phenomenal. And there's not many websites out there that are faster. Okay. So if you think
Yeah.
of what's the fastest website in the world, okay. So the question is, but then when you go look at the site itself, okay, it's basically text. There's not even images on it. It's very simple, but in this case, that's a very good thing because again, folks can on their phone or whatever get very quickly do whatever they need to get done for the UK government. It's great, right? And but we basically went back and says, how can we build sites like that, but not having limitations or like I want to have an image, I want to have a banner, I want to do experimentation, I want to do personalization, I want to do all these things, but still be this fast, right? And I think that's has been a very interesting journey for us to figure this out on how to do that. And so I think that's certainly one aspect that is technically, I guess, pretty challenging if you think of it that way. How do you actually do that, right? So how do you do that? So let me actually
And Cedric,
show you.
I mean, you've just brought
Oh,
up
go,
this
go, go ahead.
measured site. So, I mean, obviously, to define fast, we need to have a metric. You mentioned LCP or largest contentful paint being one of the key ones that you look at. But as far as tooling, you've just gone to this site. Other people might know like the Lighthouse scores, etc. So, where should I get the measurements?
Okay, so obviously you can have your so let's talk about how you're not going to get your measurement. Okay, a lot of people make this. So what you might know that if you're on a site like this, Google has developer tools in the browser, and then you can have the Lighthouse. You can do the Lighthouse report within your browser. Okay, do not do that. Okay, don't do that because that's testing your local computer. And if you have a fast computer and a fast network, it just tests your computer, and that you might have splendid results. Um, Even though in real world that doesn't really matter. So if you want to do Lighthouse scores, the best way to do that is with the PageSpeed website or PageSpeed Insights. It's called PageSpeed Insights. That's in order to get kind of like, I guess, it does both. It loads the data from, I guess, the real world telemetry data if your website is actually in production, right? If your website or experience is not in production, which is most likely we're still working on it, right? Then you won't get any telemetry data because people are not on your site yet. In this case, it does the actual Lighthouse score. It calculates the score based on your site. You have to make your site public in order to make it accessible to that. But I think you might find a way to do that. And then it
And you
actually
mentioned, by the way,
measures.
for those who don't understand terms like telemetry, what does that actually mean? Like, what am I missing out on?
Okay,
What can I get?
so anyone, like if you're using Google Chrome on your phone or on desktop to browse around the internet, Google is actually collecting how quickly the site is loaded for you, and it's sending this data back to Google um, in a way that's privacy preserving. So they won't really collect your IP address or anything. So there's no way for somebody to actually go back and see what kind of sites you visited. So it's
Yeah,
definitely built in a privacy preserving way. But so this data is actually then aggregated. So this site that I used earlier just now, this one here too, they basically use an API that goes against that telemetry data that is collected. Again, it's totally aggregated data. You can't tell individuals from it anymore. It's just aggregated, and it works for pretty much all sites. If you need to have a certain amount of traffic for it to show up, if
got
there's
it.
too little traffic, they won't add you because again, that's the privacy preserving way that it's just a few people accessing a site. They don't want to add that to the data set. But if you have some decent amount of traffic, there should be no problem for you to be able to access that data and then be able to see how your site is doing. Now, again, you can obviously collect the data yourself, but these are public data sets, which are really good to kind of, I guess, compare with maybe some of your competitors, how you're doing versus them, or you can figure out some of the projects you recently did. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, I'm assuming everyone's like sidetracked right now, and they're going and putting their URLs in and trying to test things out. But you know, measurement's one thing, but what is the benchmark? Like, how do we know what good looks like?
Yeah, so there is um, like for each one of those values, there's basically thresholds. Actually, I have a better value for that. So um, the way that gets calculated, actually, no, let me actually, no, we're two different. I mix up things. Nope, no, not good. So one thing is for the data that's collected telemetry, there's kind of like a definition of what is good and what is poor.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not be the best place to show you that. Actually, Google has a good page where this is all documented, and you can go to Core Vitals, and then you'll find that things. But there's a base, that's kind of an someone, folks decided that based on looking at the data, that is probably something that is considered good and that's considered not so good. Now, again, there's obviously lots of um, like research that went into kind of deciding that what that is. Now, when it comes to that's for telemetry, there's the same thing for scoring for Lighthouse. This for lab. If you do the test yourself, where depending on which metrics and what value this has, how much scores you get, right? And so that's the way the score gets calculated. This I guess now I guess famous Lighthouse score 100, which is basically the best you can reach in sense of if you reach if your website has a Lighthouse scores 100 of both desktop and mobile, you're considered among the fastest websites in the world. So I think that's kind of correlating this back to um, why is the score important? The score helps you to kind of obviously gamification, kind of like, hey, I want to reach this, right? That's one thing. But the other one is also what do you get? Like, what do you like if your website has a Lighthouse score for mobile and desktop of 100 in Lighthouse score, you're among the fastest websites in the world. And with the benefits that we just mentioned earlier a little bit about.
So a lot of questions there, but let me just pause for a second. If you're watching live and you've got a question, or even post live, if you're watching a recording, feel free to drop a question into the chat. And we've got Cedric here live, so we can absolutely, pick his brain and get more insight. But my immediate question for you around that perfect score of 100, if I invest effort and I get to 100 or, as close as possible, am I done, or is this a sliding scale that I have to keep renewing and keep looking at?
Well, depending on what kind of changes you're doing to your site, but typically it is, what we see often is that, some of our customers, they launch their site, they spend a lot of effort in making sure it's fast, and then over time it deteriorates because folks just keep adding things to it. So one of the popular things that, reduces your score is extra JavaScript that gets added. Oh, we need this tracker, we need this, and we need that.
Yeah.
So over time, more JavaScript gets added, for example, through a tag management system or so. It's a tag manager, Google Tag Manager, or the one from Adobe data collection. And then the website actually gets progressively slower because more of that gets added, which adds to the whole weight of the site, right? So it is something to kind of keep a tab on, kind of understanding of that, and obviously have mitigation strategies, and there's ways to add this functionality
Yep.
without impacting the score. But I think that's the one that I think it's that's where it gets interesting, right? It's like, okay, how do I even achieve that? And so, but yes, you have to ideally keep at least, I don't know, I would at least check once per month,
Yeah.
like put it
Okay.
on your calendar, like once per month, check how things are going, and because in case it suddenly deteriorates. Now again, I know folks have some of folks set up their own monitoring systems for that, which I think is a great thing to do, to actually keep an eye on that.
But you raised a very good point, because I know sometimes we're rolling out a project and, we, as pre-go live, we want to make sure our score is high, but that, the responsibility is broader than just the core dev team who are building the initial site. It's everyone involved, and it's an ongoing thing because things change and things do evolve, right? And there are requests to add functionality, etc. So yeah, I think it's a good metric to, or a good rhythm to be in, right? So,
Hmm.
and then do you see I mean, will there be a time where there might be a score of 200 to aspire to, like as things change, or do you think this is something that'll be reflective for some time now?
No, I think this. So what happens is that sometimes the way the score gets calculated gets refined or changed. I think it's going to be 100. That's it. But you see here, for example, actually on the Lighthouse scores scoring calculator page, which is an open GitHub project, where you can see there's different versions of the metrics of how it was calculated, depending on you see here there's different versions like version 5. This exact site that I've scored here actually only had a 93,
Hmm.
and then afterwards went to 100. So and actually version 10 was just introduced a week ago or so. So there's basically more a debate on what are the things that really matter to kind of to calibrate that. The debate is the idea is that the lab score simulates as close as possible the results that you get in real world. It's obviously
Yeah.
tricky because there's many different factors that are involved in whatever what your actual real life, like real world score is, because that one obviously is depending on like what kind of folks are coming to your site. Do you have a global audience? Do you only have a national audience? And that is a big difference, just because the way you built your site to be globally fast is very different than just being in one geography. So there's things that obviously impact that, in order to ultimately achieve that. But I think the system is certainly here to stay. Has been really stable over the last few years. Scoring gets adjusted, I guess, a little bit depending on to make sure that it really represents as close as possible what actually is going to happen in the real world. It's the whole point of the score.
Yeah, got it. So the score will remain, the top mark will be 100, but the test or the acceptance to get there might change, as standards change, etc. Okay, that's
Right.
very clear. So, I mean, is there an obtainable goal of getting a perfect score? Like, if I'm the fastest, what does that mean? Apart from bragging rights, right? Is there any, beyond what you've already shared? Is there any other, things I should be looking at so I can, you know, before we get into how to do this, there must be some effort to put in there. So, what's the payback versus the effort to put in there?
Yeah. So I think for this, I mean, two things: empathy for the visitor. I think we talked about it a little bit. Okay,
Yeah,
how much percentage of your visitors really get a good experience, right? So number one, so that I feel like is really something you can be proud about, right? You say, hey, whatever, 97% of the visitors come to our site with fast that experience. Great. The other one is globally. So the ability that something like, good, that's the UK government, it's the other side here, but it doesn't really matter. So here, for example, this is the site that we've built. Um, it shows that globally folks have, doesn't matter where they came from, they had a fast experience, right? And that's actually pretty hard to achieve. It's because of obviously network latency and other things. So you have to make sure that all this is available at the edge, no matter where, in order to do that. Now the gray areas just means that there was not enough traffic to actually grade that. So this site here gets gets maybe 400,000 requests a month. So and it's only in this geographic areas that folks are visiting the site. So in this case, that's all the data I have. But if you go to the UK government, it's actually it's a good thing here. So this is actually globally almost completely green. There's some exceptions. Now again, we have to say some geographies it is a little harder, just because the fact that folks obviously don't have that good infrastructure over there, and older computers networks are not great, so you respect that. So particularly, for example, in Africa, is really hard to get all of Africa green. Is being almost unheard of. It's probably the best you can see here. I don't think anybody beats beats the government here. Australia's actually a little bit of a surprise here. It's definitely possible to get Australia green, so I'm not sure what happened there of why that is not the case in this particular incident here.
Yeah, but I
But
mean
yeah,
that's
so
exactly the point of
yeah.
doing this, right? It's raising questions about experience that we can go and investigate, and obviously, depending on what your business is, looking at first of all the markets you're in and where the relevance is, and then prioritize those. But then to think about where else other people are visiting from and what their experience is like. So yeah, another good perspective. Yeah. So look, we've obviously talked about the need, and there's from bragging rights to monetary impact. There's a lot of reasons to look into making your site performant fast, if not the fastest. But if it's so obvious, why isn't everyone doing this already? Right. So is there a magic make it fast button somewhere that we can just go and press?
I wish. So, um, building a site like the one I have here, I showed the results earlier that it also has a LiDAR score of 100 globally, and is the site that I mentioned that has like roughly 400,000 requests page views per month or so. The site has ads, advertising. It has dynamic data in there. It loads things. So this is a regular site. It's not anywhere special, but it still achieves to do that. So you ask yourself, how do you do this? So the first thing you have to do is really budget. I know it sounds like, what do you mean budget? So in order to achieve the performance goals, you need to know how much can you actually spend on each of the different things in order to actually get to the score 100. So I had this page open here earlier where I'm showing the score calculator, and it's also kind of like a good page to talk about budgets, because you can kind of play with the numbers here and see what happens to the score. So you can kind of play with the budget, so to speak, right? You can say, okay, what happens if I get an LCP of this? Am I still 100 or not? Or yeah. So the magic trick for this is really ultimately or the thing that makes it so important is really total blocking time. Now again, this good performance is a myriad of things. We're going to talk about that. I'm not going to go through all details. That alone will take a few hours to talk through all the details, everything we did to get to that, what we do here. But the key aspect is really this: how much is the browser busy with executing things that it downloads before the user sees something. And that's referred to as total blocking time. So blocking because the browser is kind of blocked from visualizing the site. And that one is really important. So you see here, like if I have 30 milliseconds here, so that in this case for this particular site, the browser was blocked for 30 milliseconds to execute whatever we send them. When you download a site, it downloads HTML, it downloads JavaScript, it downloads CSS, it downloads images, right? It downloads all the stuff and has to kind of, make the site out of it. So in this case, it spent 30 milliseconds doing that. And if you put that number up, and I'm playing here a little bit with the thing, and as soon as I hit 100 milliseconds, my score gets to 99. So you get a little bit here. Okay, so I probably have around 40, 50 milliseconds that I can spend doing this. Now, of course, the other metrics also matter, but if you think of if I'm picking out one, right? So I think budget as the number one item. Again, I want more details, but you get the idea. So you have to set yourself a budget for these things. The other um, is you have to think of the browser as again as a client that is making network connections and is opening things, and everything takes time. And if you want to load it, if you want to load a site in below a second or in around a second or something like that, um, you don't have to again think of what are all the things that are actually happening or needs to happen in that second. And a popular mistake, if you want to call it that way, or a popular thing that is being done is folks say, well, I'm going to get the images from here. I'm going to get the JavaScript from there, and I'm going to get the website from here. So the browser having to talk to different servers in different places is basically something you cannot afford. If you want to build the fastest website in the world, or you have these results here, you basically cannot afford to make connections to multiple other servers. Just that alone takes time, right? And again, can you build one that has two, three connections? You probably could. There's all kinds of tricks to kind of do this, but you're spending your budget on that. So
Yep.
so you basically have to solve this by, okay, how can I avoid that from happening? Is there ways to do that? Now, luckily, there's simple ways to actually avoid that from happening. So I think so. It's basically a whole slew of these kind of, I guess, budget plus trying to figure out what am I really doing there in order to actually get to that. And I think that was the exercise that we went through to do that, and what it would take to, put that into a product, and so customers could just, take the product out of the box and get that performance, I guess, right? So I think that was the whole aim of this exercise that we were doing.
So you're obviously putting some focus on the architecture side, the product side, but for people thinking about the coding, the front end experience, you mentioned just there, the sources of assets, etc., and it's quite common to see subdomains, etc., things like that. So that's one aspect of it. But what else should I be thinking about as far as if I'm working on a project, as far as loading order and those type of things to really bump up these scores?
Yeah. So that's loading order is a great keyword there, right there. Um, Again, we talked about total blocking time, sense of okay, how much JavaScript can happen. It's all in the order. It's going to your point. The order is relevant. Um, when you look at the metrics that we're measuring here, the largest contentful paint, or when is the website actually visually there for the user to kind of start reading and understanding where to go next, and is is really that initial view. If you're on a mobile phone, that initial view is reasonably small because whatever fits on the screen. If you're on a desktop computer or even bigger screen, maybe that's a lot much bigger. There's a lot more stuff that needs to get loaded in order to actually fill the screen, and there's a lot more content that can be loaded. But needless to say, smaller, big screens, there's this initial view that you have. And the other aspect of, I guess, architecting your solution for performance and thinking about performance first when you build something is really thinking about how can I make sure that the browser actually focuses on either rendering or preparing, everything gets downloaded really for that initial view, right? I know the page that you're actually visiting or the app that you're loading might actually have a lot of more stuff underneath that is not visible at the time of the initial view. And it's fine if that gets loaded a little later because, again, the user doesn't really see that unless it starts scrolling. But typically, people don't scroll in the first second of loading a page. They scroll at second number 5, maybe second number 4 or 5. But if by then you already loaded the site, you can kind of start loading the rest of it. So this idea of really the load order and focusing on the things that are actually relevant for the first view is one of the other, I guess, key ingredients in order to achieve that.
Yeah, and then your comment around budgeting before, that comes down to what do you prioritize as far as what should you attack first, right? So if it's a quick win to go and defer some of the loading of the page because you want that viewable area to load super fast, and that impacts the score higher than other areas, then you do that first and then move on to something else, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this idea that you're really trying to make sure that the browser is not loading things that are actually not necessary for the initial view. That's first and foremost. I think that's the easiest one. And I know a lot of folks doing this already today, right? But then even go as far as images that are lazy loaded and stuff like that. So these techniques have been around for a while. You need to apply all of them. There's no way to get to the score. but you might not be enough, right? So you need to really focus on maybe some interactive items that are in the view. Of course, when you initially load them, um, they might not be interactive in sense of they're just you're just visually seeing them, but
Yeah.
nobody's clicking on it yet. And then you can make it interactive later. So again, these are tricks, not cheating, right? But it's just really making sure focusing on the initial experience, the visitor sees what to do next, and then when
Yes.
they're actually on the interactive side, you had enough time to load these things, so the user doesn't really feel like it's late or it's coming in late, but at least they don't have to wait until everything's rendered in the background and then becomes visual. I don't know, like 10 or 5 or 10 seconds later.
Yeah, that's great. Cedric, you've shared a lot of insights, but as we kind of wrap this session up, what are your top three things? Like what should be people thinking about, like, as takeaways to go and actually do, if not today, then, in the next, few days?
Yeah, so I mean, assessment of your own kind of scores and work that you've done, and kind of looking at this, I think that's always good. So page speed insights is a good place to start. Go to page speed insights and get your current assessment. Use the Trio site to get a little bit of a history on how things are going. Is it improving? Is it not improving? And then, of course, the Lighthouse score itself gives you suggestions of how to improve the site. Some of them are really useful to follow and to do that. That won't get you to 100, but it will improve the current site that you have. If you do really plan to build a site that has a 100 Lighthouse score, if you want to have the fastest site, you might have to dig a little deeper, and maybe rebuild your site, but with that in mind from the beginning, right? So it's kind of tough to. I mean, we found, again, there might be ways. I'm not saying that we figured it all out. We tried to kind of retrofit existing sites. It's kind of tricky. So that's why we ended up saying, you know what, we need kind of like a new approach for that. And the other thing, the reason is obviously Adobe is a product company, so we're thinking of how can we productize things like that. So if you think of when we delivered a product and it has 100 out of the box, we need to have budget left for the customers to add their things, right? Like you can't,
Yeah.
we basically need to deliver a product that is even faster so that then customers can start adding their things. And they're still at the end of when they're done with the project and added everything they wanted, it's still 100. So there's an extra margin that we have to add for a project. So I think that's extra tricky. But the other aspect of that I might want to say is it's um, again, it's not one thing. It's lots and lots and lots of small things that makes it all up. They all have to be correct, and in order to do that, right? So it's a lot of it's basically that's what it comes down to. And but we obviously think it's a super interesting challenge. It's rewarding, and I think it's great to see if particularly the experiments that we've done so far, where again the customers, these are real life sites that we built. It's not just I think real life pages that we built for experimentation purposes to kind of figuring out how far can we push the thing, adding personalization, experimentation, adding all this stuff into it, if it's still keeping the score, in order to really see how far can we push that we can have all those people visiting the site getting a good experience. I think that's ultimately what we're after, and also seeing the actual business results after that, so that the extra, I guess, dollars that our customers can make, and so. But again, there's not just one way of doing it, or maybe actually maybe so. I know some people ask me, so maybe that's a good kind of closing statement. There's many ways to build sites that are fast. There's not that many ways to build sites that are the fastest. So there's not, it's like there's not, you make choices about technology with this JavaScript framework, this JavaScript framework, whatever it is. There's lots of ways, and you can get to a fast site. If you want to have build a site that is the fastest, there's just a few ways to do that. And I think it's an interesting challenge, and we're obviously looking forward for having a discussion also in the ecosystem and the community here of how can we more establish that, and people kind of learn about how to do this, so that it doesn't become like a rocket science project to do this.
Yeah, yeah. And the only thing I'd add is that, going back to your initial discussion around how it reflects on the business, like set yourself some targets to say, well, what does it look like if we increase performance by our score by 10, and set a goal as far as does it actually see an impact of the bottom line? And that will help you get attention internally to prioritize this, get the resources and support you need. We just know
Correct.
this factually works. You increase performance, you get a better business outcome. So test and learn, and build on top of that as you work towards that score. Cedric, we're out of time.
Very good.
There've been some really great learnings here. So first of all, thank you for joining on the show and sharing your words of wisdom.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Can we look to get you back in the future for some deeper details on this and many other things that you're thinking about?
Sure, sure, absolutely. I mean, next up is Summit. I know we just wanted to
Yeah.
talk about that. Uh,
So
Obviously,
March.
Adobe's gonna have a summit. So I don't know. You want to give us a little bit of a spiel here?
Yeah, check out summit.adobe.com. If you haven't heard about Adobe Summit before, it is the event to be at. So Cedric will be there on stage, presenting on all the things that's in his head, where we're taking the products. It's high attendance from peers across the industry, and it's in a fun place in Las Vegas as well. So if you want to work out where is the number one place to be to stay in touch with what's happening. And Cedric, it's a whole range of your broader team, right? It's product managers, it's engineering teams. We've got hands-on labs right up to architecture sessions, and even some sneak peeks and roadmap items as well, right?
Correct. Yeah, we're actually gonna have a lab on like how to build the fastest site in the world. Yep,
Yeah,
you're
there
gonna
you
do
go.
that.
So
You get your hands
Cedric will
on
be
it.
there live. You can tap him on the shoulder and ask him questions. So great. And of course, you reach out to your Adobe team if you want to find out more. Of course, they'll put you in contact with the right resources, and we obviously have account teams right around the globe. And of course, come here to Experience League. There's always something new here, tutorials, live streams like the one we have today. Talk to other community members, and share and learn from what other people are doing in different projects. So, Cedric, again, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. And let's wrap up there. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Welcome. Thank you.